Alrighty. Little bit of holy hip hop. I hope you enjoy it. Enjoyed it. Oh, actually, I want to go to this. There we are. Continuing on with Black History Month, I'm going to talk about this gentleman, the servant of God, Martin Maria DePores Ward. Yes. Or as he was born, that's his name in religion. His his actual name was Matthias DeWitt Ward. Matthias Ward. I'll write that on the board. Matthias Ward. And he lived from 1918 until 1999. 1918 until 99. All right, so not that long ago. What? Well, I think it's not that long ago. It's within my lifetime, but it's like 30 years ago. It's before you guys were born, so it's a long time for you. And as I said, he's a servant of God. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts, to an interracial couple. Okay, one of his parents was black, one of his parents was white. Did I note down which was which? I did not. Okay, so I don't know whether the father was white or black or the same for the mother. Anyways, but he grew up. He was not born into a Catholic family. Actually, his parents were Methodist. They were Methodist Christians. He was one of 11 siblings, so they were almost Catholic with that large family. You know? Mom and Dad were having a good time, right? 11 kids. Woo! And then they moved down from Boston to Washington, D.C., which of course was the South. So they went from the North and Boston to the South. So you can imagine how his experiences might have changed. Although, if you were black in the North, you weren't treated much better than you were in the South, I would imagine. Well, I should say there were differences, obviously. But nevertheless, it's not like because he was living in Boston, somehow everything was peachy keen and wonderful. But certainly things got worse situationally moving down to the South, to Washington, D.C. And while he was living in Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, he was introduced to Catholicism, and it attracted him. So he wanted to convert or change, enter into full communion with the Catholic Church, moving from the Methodist community into the Catholic Church. And that's what he did in 1940. And not long after that, he discerned that he had a religious calling. He was called to a more committed following of Jesus. Not that all Christians aren't called to be committed followers of Jesus, but some, like, in any religion, you have people who want to be, do somewhat more, like 24/7 devoted to their religion. And so he felt that religious calling. And in 1942, he first entered a group called I think it's called the Congregation of the Savior is its name, but they're also known as the Salvatorian Fathers. But that didn't last for him. He got sick, and so he was forced to leave the group just because of his sickness. So that didn't work out. And so he moved to Brooklyn, New York, where he was introduced to the conventual Franciscans. And you can see here he's wearing the OFM, Conventual Order of Friars Minor, as they're called, the Order of the Lesser Brothers, conventuals. Conventuals because they lived in convents and buildings, and they wore shoes. They did weird things like that. The stricter Franciscan, because you have other Franciscan groups that are stricter groups like Capuchin Franciscans, and what are called the regular Franciscans, the OFMs, were stricter groups, and so they would only wear sandals or would wear nothing at all on their feet. They also lived in buildings, but they also lived in huts and stuff like that. So, but the conventuals were actually the original group founded by this man named St. Francis of Assisi, an Italian man. And that's why they're called Franciscans, even though their name is officially the Order of Lesser Brothers or Friars Minor. So he joined, they're the original group from St. Francis of Assisi, and then you have branches off of it. So anyway, So here he is wearing the habit of the group, okay, in his habit for the OFMs, the Conventual Franciscans. And so he discovered them and decided he wanted to join them, the Conventual Franciscans. Now, at the time, as we know from the story of Venerable Augustus Tolton, most Catholic seminaries, even in the North, would not take black men. But the Conventual Franciscans accepted him into their seminary that they had on Staten Island, New York, which I actually visited once. I didn't realize this because I thought about joining the conventuals until I did the psychological exams and they weeded me out. They did not go well. It was the Rorschachs that did it to me, Ms. Barris. Always be, those of you who are doing social work and psychology and stuff, be careful of the Rorschachs. Have your answers prepared in advance. Huh? Anyways, but that's just kind of cool that there's that intersection between, I mean, I didn't meet him. He wasn't there when I visited, but just that intersection that I was in the same building that he was in. And they've long sold the building on Staten Island because they have no vocations. No one wants to be a friar anymore. Anyway, so he was the first black, the first African American to join the Conventual Franciscans in America, in the United States. The Conventual Franciscans had no problem with him being black. And, kind of, in an interesting way, when he became religious, you kind of take a new name and stuff like that. It's kind of like when you join a band, everyone kind of takes a nickname and stuff like that. You do that in religious orders as well. Usually some saint. And in his case, of course, since he was black, actually he's interracial, he took the name of an interracial saint, Saint Martin de Porres. Martin de Porres, who was, I believe, Peruvian from Peru. Tell me, sir, what do you know?
I know people for the miracle and the fortune for
The port.
their project on back in his 3 year.
What else do you know about him? What about him might connect him to Ward and his history?
I think because he was on a ship and he had made his miracle. I don't remember what it was, but that's gonna be a cute part of the ship.
Did something on the ship?
Yeah.
Some miracle.
I think I mean the farmer.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's Well, yeah, that's true. That's very good. One of the things that I was thinking of, the connection would be that Martin de Porres was also biracial. He was of African. St. Martin de Porres was an African, but I believe he also had a Native American mother or father. So he was both black and he was also Indian. Okay. So there's that connection. That's maybe another reason he took the name of St. Martin de Porres. Also Maria after the mother of Christ, Mary. Okay, so that was his name in religion. Much of his family, who were Methodist, actually his conversion alienated them. They didn't understand it. They didn't know why he would want to become a Catholic. But anyways, and as I told you also again with Venerable Augustus Tolton, the Catholic Church didn't really know what to do with a black priest. I mean, where do you assign him? Most Catholics were white, and probably would not accept a black priest. So they sent him to the missions in Brazil. The Franciscans had missions in Brazil, which, if you know anything about Brazil, is a very mixed, because they had, the Portuguese brought in a lot of slaves, a lot of Africans to Brazil as well. It wasn't just the United States that had slave trade. But the difference was that they mixed, Portuguese and the African, they would intermarry and have children and stuff. So it's a very mixed culture. I mean, most people in Brazil have African blood in them, have African ancestry as well as European ancestry, which was very different from here, where it was like, keep the races, they can't marry, whites and blacks don't have anything to do with each other. So it was a different kind of culture. So I guess they thought that would be more amenable or more open to having him down there, which it seemed to be. He went down to Brazil, where he worked and served. And let's see, what else do I want to say? In 1999, when he died, he was celebrating Mass, and he had a heart attack during Mass. But he still completed the Mass. He continued on with the Mass. after which he was taken to the hospital. I mean, I don't know if he knew he had a heart attack, but, he knew he wasn't feeling well. So after the Mass, they took him to a hospital, but he died 2 days later. And he was just known as a good, very holy man, happy man, good sense of humor and stuff like that. And so his cause for canonization has been opened. And so he is now officially a servant of God. And let's see where he goes from that. And I ask Father Martin de Porres Ward for your prayers for us in this class. Amen. Not into it. There we go. But I'll have to pee. Well, I don't have Father Ward on here, but I'll slice it off from my previous lecture and just attach it onto the beginning of this. Okay, so yeah. So we're talking about the ways to liberation, and I told you there are 3 ways, and yoga might be a 4th, the yoga, the physical practice of yoga I was talking about. So that's why I put a question mark with it, but it can also be collapsed in with jnana yoga. Where am I here? Historically, yoga was, I mentioned the Upanishads talk about yoga as a practice, a physical practice, an ascetical practice, an exercise. And it's usually associated with renouncers, holy men or women, who, usually, well, they were like monks. They lived on the outskirts of society, fully committing themselves to following the path of liberation. They weren't normal people. They were fully committed to the Hindu view of life. Okay? The most popular form of yoga is called Raja Yoga, the kingly yoga. Raja means a king or a ruler. So Raja, royal yoga. Yeah, Bhagavad Gita. It's not mentioned in the Gita, but Upanishads. And eventually a commentary of sorts or a description of the practice of yoga was written down by a person named Patanjali. Patanjali. See his dates there, anytime from 100 BC to 300 AD. All sorts of question marks about, I guess he existed. I'll assume that he existed, but the name, there are other people called Patanjali apparently. Other books written by a Patanjali. There's so we're not sure what he was. He's usually considered a mystic and a philosopher, but there's also a grammar by Patanjali. So was he a grammarian? There's also a medical book by Patanjali, a book on medicine. So was he a doctor? Was he a physician? We don't know, because, someone else could have the name Patanjali. It's not necessarily like there's only one Patanjali. Nevertheless, whoever this Patanjali was, he wrote what are called the Yoga Sutras around the 200s. And in the Yoga Sutras, you find a compilation of the theory and the practice of this exercise, physical exercise called yoga. And there's a picture of one of the, hardest, there are a number of hard positions. This is supposed to be one of the hardest positions to do in yoga. There are others. I just chose this one because I thought it looked the weirdest, really hard. And this is, this is a picture from the sutra of the Patanjali Sutra on yoga. All right, discussing it. Just thought you'd find it interesting. Don't worry about this quote. The way of action, or karma yoga. Karma yoga. Talked about karma before. Humans live in a world where there are things to be done. You have a dharma and you have obligations. Your status involves duty, your obligations, and you have to perform these obligations. Your dharma. So dharma and karma, they don't just rhyme, they go together. They're interrelated. To perform your dharma is to gain good karma. Yes. Are those Doritos, Miss Hoy? What are those? Fritos? Doritos? It's a party pack? Ooh, you brought a party. Ooh, very nice. Party in the house. Miss Carney, Good. Oh, I already told you that. I'm just trying to weed out repeats so I don't repeat stuff over and over again. Yeah, so the way of karma, or the way of action, is to perform unselfish actions for others' benefit. Okay, so that you build up, well, you build up good karma for a future life, but eventually you want, as I said, it's unselfish or disinterested. So you want to eventually have the cessation of all karma, of all activity. And if you read the reading from the Bhagavad Gita, I was listening to it on my way over here in the car. You know, what Krishna says, repeats this often, several times to Arjuna about, to be disinterested in your actions, that you don't do things out of hate or for desire. So you don't do things out of hate or for love. You do them because you're supposed to do them. They're your dharma. Okay. If they have a good effect, that's fine. But if they have sometimes they have bad effects, I guess, like Arjuna killing people at the Battle of Kurukshetra. Anyways, so it's karma that produces bondage. Yes. And so the way of karma is, as I said, you're trying to build up good karma. Obviously, it's the better karma. However, ultimately, you should be disinterested as to the outcome, whether it's successful or not, because the dharma is really more important than the action. Okay, the actions of your dharma. So Arjuna killing people whom he loved and respected was his dharma. So it was more important for him to fulfill the dharma than to worry about the karmic effects of those actions. He has to be disinterested in that and simply perform what he's supposed to perform, and not worry about benefits or rewards. So there was this little verse in the Bhagavad Gita which kind of disturbed me. I mean, I don't know. I'm a Christian, so I didn't really like it, but because I have my conception of God given to me from the Jews, that God is a loving God and cares about us and we're valuable to God and whatnot. But in the Bhagavad Gita, no, if you follow this principle, the gods neither love us nor hate us. They're disinterested in us. They're following their dharma as gods. If the dharma is to be helpful, that's what they're supposed to be. But remember, they're also evil gods, the Asuras, who are kind of bad gods, and they're doing their dharma too. So that's kind of good in a way, if you think about it, because they're fulfilling their purpose, which is their dharma. And in the Gita, it says in one of the chapters that we read, Krishna says, I neither love nor hate my creatures, the creatures that I've created or that have emerged from me. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, that's logical according to the ideas that you're supposed to be disinterested about the outcome. But as a Judeo-Christian, I guess, it didn't really, I don't know, it didn't touch me very much. But in the Gita, okay, that's just a quote. Don't worry about it. I'm going to move on. In the Gita, Krishna's recommendation, Krishna talks about the way of knowledge. Krishna talks about the way of karma. But the highest form of, or the best way, I guess I should say, is the way of bhakti or devotion. Because as you read the Bhagavad Gita or the selections that we have from the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna reveals himself, who reveals himself to Arjuna, and just says, whatever, it doesn't matter whatever sacrifice, when you offer the sacrifice, you're worshiping me. But even people who don't believe in me, like people who are worshiping other gods, they're not necessarily worshiping me. They are worshiping me ultimately, because Krishna is Vishnu, and Vishnu is the supreme, I guess Brahman is what they're trying to say, but is the supreme being. And so even any devotion to any god can be devotion to Vishnu, bhakti. And so that can lead to liberation. If you think about me when you're dying, Krishna says, have me in your mind's eye and think about me then you will be he promises liberation to Arjuna at his death. So think about me when you're dying. Okay, and you will achieve. So have devotion, bhakti. And bhakti is intense emotional love for a personal god, Vishnu or Shiva. Bhakti can also be shown to a guru, a teacher. Teacher can be seen as godlike. And so this is where in Hinduism, the use of idols, physical representations of the gods or the spirits or the demons come into play, and people dress them up and put them to sleep and feed them and pour oil over them, do all sorts of things to them. A lot of people do think that the gods not just manifest through these physical objects, but are actually present in them, and somehow the idol does become alive in a way. And so that's how you mediate your relationship with the God and show your devotion, show your bhakti. So those are a big part of the bhakti movement. And Krishna says that, this is the best. Devotion is the best way because anyone can do it. And you see this in the Gita. He says that anyone can do this. This is open even to women. Oh, yeah, women, But it's open to the peasants, to the slaves, the people, the lowest of the low can perform bhakti, whereas maybe the way of knowledge and the way of karma are not so much open to people as well. But bhakti it's kind of universal. Anyone can do it and therefore achieve liberation. Okay. Whoops. The last thing I'm going to talk about is caste. Because technically today in modern India, it supposedly doesn't exist. At least it's outlawed, but it exists. And it's a part of the religion. It's still part of the religious element of Hinduism, caste, or varna, as it's described in Sanskrit, varna. One of the 4 professional divisions of Hindu society. Varna, which literally means color. Again, you start to see, remember we talked earlier about Friedrich Max Muller and his idea, based off of language, of the Aryan invasion theory, the Aryan migration. And then other scholars took his idea and racialized it, made it racist. This was some of their evidence, was that the Varnas, the caste system, was named after color, and they assumed that it was based on the color of the people. The Aryans were the higher castes, and they were lighter skinned. And then the lower caste were the darker-skinned indigenous Indians who were living there. So they thought the caste was based on the race. The Aryans were high, up on the caste system, totem pole, and the native dark-skinned people were on the lower totem pole. Okay? And that might be true. But that was the theory. Nevertheless, that's what it means. It means color. But whatever, it's a division. It was a division, an ancient division of Hindu society. You had Varna, and there are 4 main Varnas, but within the Varna there are hundreds and hundreds of jatis. Okay, jatis or birth castes. Okay, so you might be born into the rulings in a Kshatriya class, which are the rulers. But amongst the rulers, there are different types of rulers. There are kings, and there are bureaucrats, people beneath that, who is just, So it depends on what your jati might be, your birth caste. You might be born as a vaishya, a merchant, a businessman, but your jati is in jewelry. You do jewels, pearls, and gems. Or you work in your metal workers, your jati, your family. Kind of like, in the old days, not so much today, but, you might see signs that would say Johnson and Sons, on the bakery. And the bakery was, it was founded by like great granddad, and then he passed it on to grandpa, and grandpa passed it on to your father, and then your father passes it on to you, and you're all bakers down the line. Okay, that's kind of like the same idea with jati. We don't do that anymore because people don't want to run the farm or do the bakeries. They want to go off and make tons of money and do something else. But in the old days, that gave you stability. It gave you a job, place to live. A lot of people would live where they worked. You'd live over the bakery or live over the jewelry shop or the store or whatever. And and you'd pass it on to your children, and they would work there. They'd have some place to work when they grew up. Then you'd eventually pass it on to them, so they'd have a business, so they could establish a family, they have some income, stability. It doesn't happen so much today. But that's kind of what a jati is, all right? My family was street sweeper. My dad was a street sweeper. My granddad was a street sweeper. So I'm a street sweeper. You know, that's my jati. So caste. Caste you're born into. All right. Jati also is inalienable. It's a property of your body. This is the belief. The jati is a property of your body and cannot be removed. So it's not just like, as I said, well, my dad chose to be a street sweeper, and my granddad chose to be a street sweeper. God bless you. If that's that's my job that I choose to do. Like you could choose to do something else. No, your jati is to be a street sweeper. It's who you are. Who you are. You are the job. And so it's based on your lineage. Or Varna, excuse me, I should say Varna includes your lineage, where you're born, to whom you're born, but also includes the occupation that you're supposed to pursue. And as I said, there are many, many jatis within the four Varnas. What are the four Varnas? Well, if you read the readings for Hinduism, you read the Hymn of the Cosmic Man, yes? Rig Veda, Book 10, Hymn 90, yes? No? I listened to it in the car on the way here today, because this car, I think I eventually should do it, teaching the class. No, anyways. But the Hymn of the Cosmic Man, as it's called, which is not addressed to any god, you might have noticed. There's no god attached to the hymn. So it's just a generalized hymn to this cosmic man, Purush, who is sacrificed, who's cut up into pieces in the creation of the universe. And each piece becomes one of the Varnas. The head is the ruling class, or excuse me, the head is the priest, excuse me. Brahmins, note the I, Brahmins, the priests. Okay? I think the arms are the kshatriyas, the rulers, and the warriors, the soldiers, so the rulers and the soldiers. And the thighs, the legs, are the Vaishyas, who are those who own land, and businessmen, merchants. And then the feet, Mr. Belfield, the dirty feet, are the Shudras, the peasants, the laborers, anyone who's, on the street corner waiting for someone to come hire them for the day. The laborers, artisans, so artists are Shudras, painters and pottery makers and stuff like that. And just general peasants, maybe people who have a little farm and subsistence living and stuff. They're peasants, they're poor. Nobody wants what they got, People don't try to break into a peasant's house, because, what do they have, They're going to have, a broken VCR player, and it's 2025, and it's like, people still have these things. They broke into the house of some poor person. Anyways, so those are the Varnas. As I said, the caste system was outlawed when modern India was founded in the late 1940s. So technically there are no real castes, but they still persist in society. And it's there embedded in the religion. It's right in the Vedas. If you're a believing Hindu, the Varnas are part of the Shruti, the structure of the whole universe. Okay? So a Brahmin is, if you're a Brahmin, you're a Brahmin, and there still is that class society in Hinduism. I know from a Christian perspective, as a Catholic in the Indian Catholic Church, at least the Roman Catholics, there are also Eastern Catholics in India, but the Roman Catholics are the largest group of Catholics. And I think it's only been in the last 10 years, if I saw a news story, that they appointed a bishop who was a Dalit, what's called a Dalit background. And these are kind of like outcasts. There are people who are so low on the totem pole, so low on the social scale, that they don't even fit into the Varnas. They're not even good enough to be Shudras. They're outcasts. All right. Typically, the bishops, when they would appoint a bishop for the Indian Catholic Church, they would choose someone. They wouldn't say this, but it just so happened that they were always from like the higher castes, even though technically the church doesn't believe in castes, and it's not part of Christian religion at all. But it is part of Hindu society. And so it was a big news story that they actually had one bishop out of all the dozens of bishops in India who was from this group. So the prejudice is still there, in the society, even though it's supposedly illegal. And you'll see this also in Indian newspapers. If you go online and you look up, the Indian newspapers, the Hindu, the Times, go online, and you go to like the personal sections, people looking for love, looking for someone to marry or a relationship. When you're doing the search, part of the search is you'll see these words. People are looking for someone who's Brahmin. A Brahmin woman or a woman from a Brahmin family is looking for a Brahmin man, to marry, or a Kshatri, So it's still there. So the Varnas were meant to, what was the purpose of them? Well, generally they were to regulate pollution. Because the Varnas mixing, different people mixing, people from different Varnas could pollute the ones who are higher up. Okay, so like the higher Varnas could not mix or marry with the lower Varnas. That was seen as pollution. Or eat with them as well. You could not eat with them. A Brahmin priest could never eat with someone who was of the Shudra Varna because it would pollute him, would make him ritually unclean. And there were certain people, there were certain holy men. Well, they were holy, I say holy men, but there were some crazy holy men, I guess you'd call them. They were kind of they were renouncers, but they were like the left-hand path, as they call it. So they were like cynic philosophers from ancient Greece. They would break all the rules. So they would do the opposite. In their crazed mind, I guess, they would, because remember, it's duality. Like Shiva is the uniter of opposites, right? So, you have good, but you also bad. You have things. So they would do bad things to kind of balance the scales, I guess. So they would have sex in public, but they would have sex with women of lower castes. They would hang out in graveyards, which you weren't supposed to do. They'd smear their bodies with the ashes of the burned up bodies. They would drink from skulls. All sorts of interesting things that you weren't supposed to do in Hindu society, which were considered outrageous. And they were so awful that if you were of the Brahmin caste and you looked at one, you had to immediately look into the sun, bind yourself with the sunlight to purify your eyes from looking at this outcast, crazy holy man. All right? So you couldn't mix, it would pollute you. It would make you dirty in a way. I guess give you bad karma, you might say. The three higher castes, the Brahmins, the priests, the Kshatriyas, the rulers and soldiers, and the Vaishyas, the businessmen, are called twice born. They're the highest level. They're twice born. Dvija in Sanskrit, Dvija from the word for two. They're twice born. And another way of putting it is they're reborn. Think about Christians, born again Christians. Yes, I've been born, Ms. Oler, but then I found Jesus and I've been born again. Right? Born again, even though I haven't really been born again, but it's a spiritual event. It's the same thing in Hinduism. They already have born again Hindus before they were born again Christians. The Dvijas, the top three castes are Dvijas. They're born agains, they're twice born Hindus. And so they achieve a second spiritual birth when they get older. At a certain point, I guess around puberty, when they, a young teenage boy of these castes will be initiated into his twice born class. He'll be given a sacred thread that he wears on his left shoulder and around his body to show his status. He's given a secret name and a special mantra that only he can pray to the gods. Sometimes you'll have a caste mark on the forehead. Sometimes. A lot of times it's religious. It indicates the god you worship. But also people can have like a mark on their forehead that indicates caste. With women, if you see a woman with a mark on her forehead, like a red mark or something like that, that's almost always indicating she's married. It's like a wedding ring. That's what's going on there. It's a wedding ring. When a woman has a dot or a smudge on her head, it indicates that she's off limits. She has a husband. But for men, it can mean the god, or it can also mean a caste that they belong to. And the Dvijas are the only ones who can study the Vedas. The Shudras cannot. So you have to be twice born in order to study the Vedas. And you're supposed to study the Vedas. Certainly for Brahmin priests, you have to know them. Women cannot, no matter of what caste. Women are not allowed to study the Vedas unless they're reborn as men. Yes, sir. Moving on. Okay, so those are the caste. That's the caste system. Moving on. Thanks be to God. I shouldn't say that. It's religious studies. I have to have methodological agnosticism, right, Ms. Lane? Still with me, Ms. Lane, or did I lose you? Huh? You're with me. Yes. God bless you, Miss Francis, for keeping me humble. Oh, there they are. Dancing down the street. Okay, so now we're moving on to the second most ancient religion that I know of, or that we seem to know of from human religions. Although, native religions are very ancient, but we don't know much about their history. But Judaism, I guess you say organized religions. Judaism, the Jews. God bless you. So is it 4 or 5 sneezes? Depends on the day. 7. Okay. 8's your record? But there's no consistency. Like it's always 4, always 5. No?
That day 6 or 7.
All right. Yeah, because I had a friend once who always 5 sneezes, which is fine. Yeah, just. God bless you, sir. Uh-oh.
Drank a lot of water this morning.
Yeah, but you're an athlete. I mean, look at me. Look at me. I can take it. Anyways, Judaism. Judaism is one of the oldest of the world's religions. It goes back many thousands of years. Okay? But it's a small religion. It's a small religion. I think somebody asked me about that. Who was that? Mr. Prinzio. You asked me about that on the quiz, right? Because in the textbook, Judaism is listed as one of the major religions. But notice in the textbook they specified that it's a major religion in its influence, because you have 2 very large religions that derive from Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Okay, but Judaism itself is rather small, but it is an old religion. Okay, according to, this here, I wrote it down, but yeah, the American Jewish Yearbook, but where is it? Let's say it. It's the American Jewish Yearbook, but it doesn't say, oh, here it is. The American Jewish Yearbook 2021. All right, I found this online. Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, 5782. So I guess 2021 is 5782. Okay, see, they have a different calendar. Remember, Anno Domini, our Gregorian calendar in the West, from Pope Gregory the, I think, 13th, Christian. So our calendar is based on Jesus, right? The life of Jesus in Nazareth. But other religions and traditions don't. Judaism bases their calendar on the creation of the world. The world was created a little over 5,700 years ago. discussed. So if you take an astronomy class here at Wounded Mercy, make sure you correct your teacher. Not 13 and some billion, a little under 14 billion. It's 5782 for thereabouts. So when you're in the synagogue, that's the date, this is the date, And of course, Islam, as we'll learn, has its own calendar, and we're in the medieval period in Islam. I think we're in the 13 or 1400s. I'll have to look that up. But anyways, according to this yearbook, around 2021, the population of Jews was just over 15 million. And they show where they are by country, by the numbers, and you can see from the numbers that most of them live either in Israel, the country of Israel, or in the United States here. About half and half, about 6.9 million living in the nation state of Israel and 6 million living in the United States, and then 2.3 million Jews scattered throughout the rest of the world. I mean, after us, it dips considerably. A lot in France, but look, nowhere near close to how many here. A lot in Canada, the UK. Okay. So historically, it's not a large religion numerically, nor is it a world religion technically. It really derives from one area of the world, but it's a significant influencer through Christianity and Islam. Pharmacy is calling me. Goodbye. No, not the time. Thank you. We'll talk about those religions later. Who is a Jew? What is a Jew? Is it a race? Is it a religion specifically? Is it just a culture? Or is it citizenship in a Jewish state like Israel? What is a Jew? It's an interesting question that even Jews, people who would say they're Jews, debate. Jews, there are a lot of Jews who are non-religious. They're secular Jews, as they're called. They have really no connection to the religion. They might be atheists or agnostics, or they might believe in God, but they don't practice the religion at all. Then there are other Jews who are very religious and see it as a religion. But there are a lot of Jews who simply see it as it's their race or their ethnicity, that they've been born into, or culture that they follow, the language, the food, stuff like that, a way of life, or their country. But, why are you in Israel? if you don't see it as something more than just citizenship. Nevertheless, there are Arab Israelis. They're not Jews, but so maybe citizenship. Maybe I should take citizenship off. But still, Jews debate. So what makes a Jew technically? According to Jews, traditionally, a Jew is someone in two conditions. Either someone has been born of a Jewish mother. You're a Jew by birth. Your mother was Jewish. Or you have converted to Judaism. Okay, you were not Jewish born. Your mother was not Jewish, but you decided to convert, change, and become part of the people of Israel. Convert, change. And here are pictures of different types of Jews. You've got the Falashas, Jews of Ethiopia and Africa. Okay, you've got European Jews, Jews in India, Indian Jews. Okay, the B'nai Israel, as they're called. Don't know how they got there, but it's how they got there. Right? They don't look all the same. They're people, Europeans, you might say they're white. Ethiopians are black. I guess people from India will be of color these days. I don't know. Someone tell me the rules. I don't know the terminology specifically is anymore, but whatever. Anyways, so that's it. But you might say, well, Dr. Dunn, my father's a Jew. Maybe my mother's Irish Catholic, but my dad is Rosenbaum. His mom was a Jew and raised Jewish and stuff like that, so I'm a Jew. No. Sorry. Sorry, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. According to Jewish law itself, no, your mother has to be of Jewish lineage. Okay? Otherwise, you have to convert. Even if your father, it doesn't go through the line of the father. This is tradition, and this would be for the traditional Jews, like Orthodox. We'll learn about Orthodox later. Other groups that are more progressive or liberal certainly would accept the patrilineal, the paternal line as well. Say you're Jewish, but traditionally no. And if you want to go to Israel, if you wanted to ever emigrate to Israel and live there, no, you would have to be born of a Jewish mother to claim Jewish citizenship in Israel as a Jew, or you'd have to convert. What does converting do? Okay, converting involves you are plunged or you dunk yourself in a mikvah, which is a big pool that, I don't know where the local mikvah is, but I would assume there is one because it's a major part of Orthodox Judaism, especially for Jewish women. It's called mikvah. It's a big pool in a synagogue or maybe attached to a synagogue. And you go there, it's full of, pure water. And to convert, you would dunk yourself under the water 3 times. All right? Sound familiar, Christians? Does that practice sound familiar to you, dunking yourself or getting dunked in water in order to enter the religion, Yeah, well, where do you think Christianity got it from? From the Jews. Jesus was a Jew. So you dunk yourself under the water 3 times in front of witnesses. You promise to observe the law of Moses, all the rules that Jews are supposed to follow. And if you're a man, you have to be circumcised. So if you weren't circumcised before, meaning having the foreskin of your penis, if you still had the foreskin of your penis, because you weren't circumcised, you would have to be circumcised. So the rabbi or the moel or whoever would have to cut you. Not for a woman, of course. So these things, and then you would be considered a Jew, and your children, if you're a woman, would be considered Jewish. Not if you're a man, though. You would be considered a Jew, fully a Jew in the community, a convert. There's still kind of a distinction between full-blooded Jews, I think. But if you're a woman, your children would then be Jewish. What? Oh, what is this? What did I put here? Oh, yes. A conversion ceremony. Maybe I'll put that online and have you watch that yourself, because this takes, it's a few minutes long. But this is just a conversion I found online of this woman who put a video of her, not only her, but her daughter's conversion to Judaism. No, maybe I'll show it to you. Yeah. Turn it up here. There we go. Yes. Okay, so the mother took the name of Mary, Mariam, and she's giving the name of Sarah to her daughter. And as she said, she's not showing her conversion because she was nude. You have to be naked. And so she doesn't want to show that. And so she'll put naked babies, who cares? So,
Yes.
she likes it.
Yeah.
Now that more, I'm not going to play all the prayers that come after this, but basically prayers where you're promising, to follow the law and stuff like that, and you take your name and. Okay, so that's she just singing for you what the prayer was she was saying with the baby every time she dunked herself, and then when she was dunking her daughter, blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, for you've given us your commandments, or you made us holy by your commandments and your laws about immersion, about dunking. Okay, so basically saying, we're following your law, Lord. We bless you, Lord. We're following your law, which you told us to do, to dunk in water. All right. So yeah, notice she breathes in the face of the baby. I don't know if someone breathed in her face when she did it. I don't know who was doing that, but anyways, but she breathes in the face. That's biblical. That's in the Jewish scriptures. When God creates Adam, the first man, the Bible says he breathed into his nostrils, into his nose, life. Okay, so you're breathing, it's like symbol of breathing life into this, I guess, the spirit or the soul of the baby who's now entering the people of Israel, the Jews. And then dunking her. And so, yeah, I mean, this is, you don't see this so clearly, I guess, the connection with Christianity. I mean, you do see, I think, the connection with the Christian religion, which we'll talk about later, but especially amongst Eastern Christians, which I am, who are more traditional, more kind of conservative in customs. Yeah, traditionally Christians were baptized in the nude. Everyone was nude. Okay, just like in Judaism, she was nude, and the baby's supposed to be nude because it shows like. Well, anyways, I can tell you where. I don't know. I don't want to speak for the Jews and say why they do it. You're just supposed to do it. And they still do that in the Eastern tradition. Not for adults anymore. Adults are dressed. But babies are still baptized in the nude. They're baptized naked. So for babies they keep, because naked babies are cute. Naked adults might be a little bit creepy. A little bit creepy. But I mean, well, maybe a naked baby looks creepy too. But they want to keep the custom going, right? Which came from Judaism. Okay. What are the main things about Judaism? What's at the heart of Judaism? What's beating at the heart of the Jewish religion? I think we can identify two things, two beliefs. First, that there is only one God who is the creator and ruler of the universe. Okay? You see that right there in that blessing. Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, Melech Olam. Actually, it means King Eternal, but they translate it as universe. But King of the universe. Okay, so there's only one God who is the creator and ruler of the cosmos. And she even said that in between the second and the third baptism, we could say, or dunking, she recited the Shema, which we'll talk about at another time. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one only. Okay? So monotheism, the belief in one God. Mono, solitary, alone, single. The second belief is election or choosing. Elego means to choose in Latin. So to be chosen, election. That's what we did a few months ago. If you voted, you elected, you chose. We could call it the presidential choosing if we wanted, or the choice, whatever. We call it an election from Latin. Well, choice also comes from Latin through French, but whatever. So there's the belief that God, the one God of the cosmos, has chosen the Jews as his special people to whom he has revealed his will for human living, or at least how he wants them to live, the Jews to live. So they're obligated to God. I, a non-Jew, am not obligated in the same way. There are still laws that, they're called the Noahide laws, which deal with, laws God gave to Noah, which apply universally to everybody. But really, God has revealed his will specifically for the Jews, and they're obligated to follow it as they understand it. Hold on a second here. So I make sure that I got talk about something, but maybe notes are a little. No, keep going. All right. My notes must be out of order. No, the PowerPoint's fine this time. I think it's my notes. So I'll come back to that. Or if I don't, I'll check my PowerPoint and I'll do it later. Anyways, a little bit of history on the Jewish religion. Okay? Our most important source for the history of Judaism is, as you might imagine, or you might have heard, the Bible. Jews don't call it the Bible, but for lack of a better term for right now, I'll say the Bible. Okay? The Old Testament. Okay? The first part of the Bible, not the Christian add-on called the New Testament. Which has to be, of course, read cautiously because it's a religious text. It has a religious agenda. Historical things are mentioned and people, but that's the point of these books does not seem to be record history or anything like that. They're to record the religious beliefs of the Jews. So you have to be cautious when you're reading the Bible for history or trying to reconstruct the history of the Jews. But it's the best thing we have, other than archaeology, which is, I think, more reliable. Archaeological research is a more reliable source for the everyday life of the ancient Jews. And you can bring that into play with stuff that's in the Bible and notice where things are okay, archaeology and the Bible agree, or places where the Bible and the archaeology don't seem to agree, and I'll mention those. So at least as far as we can tell from the biblical story, the origins of Judaism come from what we call the Middle East. The Middle East, specifically Mesopotamia and Egypt. Mesopotamia is a Greek word which means between the rivers. You have two major rivers here, the Euphrates and the Tigris, flow down into the Persian Gulf. Okay? And so this area here in southern Mesopotamia and over here in Egypt are the two places where the Jews seem to come from, or have come from, their origins. We start with what's called ancient Israel, or the time of the patriarchs. Patriarch is the pater, means father in Latin. Arche means ruler. So the ruler, the father ruler, or the male head of a family, the male head of a family. And this period extends from 1900 to the 500s BC. I don't have my PowerPoint, but it says 1600 here on my notes. Okay, whatever. I'll go with the PowerPoint. Probably, no. Maybe I forgot to put a 1 there. Yeah, that might be a mistake. I'll follow my notes. I'll change my mind here. And we have oral traditions, oral meaning spoken traditions that were passed on about some of these ancestors or father figures, patriarchs of the ancient Jews, and were given their family history. Here we're looking at the Bible, okay? The book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, is where you'll find their stories. Genesis, Genesis means the beginning, to generate or bring something about. So it's the beginning book, the beginning stories, and it tells the ultimate origin of the Jews and the Judaism, where they came from. Where did they come from? They came from, well, basically these three men, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? But before we get to them, there are other people described, tribe, yeah, we'll get to that. There are other people described, and I'm going to mention them because it might clear up some confusion because the Jews are known by so many different names. The first thing in Noah, remember Noah and the flood, Noah has his boat. Noah is not a Jew. He's not an Israelite. There's a story that comes before we get to the story of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, okay, the forefathers of the Jewish people. So Noah's not Jewish, okay? He precedes their father figures, the patriarchs. But Noah has a son, Shem, who will eventually have children, and eventually through these children, this man Abraham will be born. So they are related through Noah. So he has this son Shem. Hence, the Jews are also called sometimes Semites. So we get the word anti-Semitic or Semites, right, from Shem, one of Noah's sons. And Shem, as I said, has children, and one of his children is given the name Eber. And hence, the Jews are also sometimes known by this ancestor. They're known as Hebrews, from the name of Eber. And Eber is an ancestor of this man Abraham, which we'll get to in a moment. That's the story in the Bible. Again, you have to read this cautiously. From archaeology, we do know that there were groups of people in that region of the world who we could call Hebrews, or might be Hebrews, a group of people. And then in the biblical story, it's just been made a name of one of the ancestors of Abraham. They've kind of mythicized it in a way. All right. What is a Hebrew, and what's its relationship? What was their relationship to the Jews? Well, we're not sure, but ancient records from this region of Mesopotamia do mention groups of drifters, nomads, people who would fight for hire, so mercenaries. They would fight for you if you paid them, and they were called by this word Apiru or Habiru. Or they're also called the Habiru, which scholars think, is very close to Hebrews, the Hebrews. It's interesting. Is that where the Jews came from? Did they come from this nomadic group that was moving around Mesopotamia that eventually settled in one part? Is this where Hebrew came from? We don't know, but it's just interesting because if you do, in some places in the Jewish scriptures and their sacred writings, you get maybe a hint or a glint of maybe that there is a connection. For example, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 26, verse 5, Deuteronomy, they say 26, verse 5. Don't worry about this now. We'll learn about their scriptures later. Just go with it for now. Deuteronomy. It's part of their law, the Jewish law code. And in that law code, there's a description of, how when you go to the temple,
And you bring your first fruits, so these people are farmers, a lot of farmers, and, what you call it, not cattle, people who take care of animals. What do you call those people? Not farmers, but they're, what's the word? It's not coming. Well, anyways, people who take care of cattle or animals, pigs, sheep, stuff like that. Yes, shepherds and stuff, but that's not really the word I'm looking for. People who raise these things. But anyways, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So when you bring, you had to bring the first fruits or the first parts of your produce to God. You owed them to God. Because it was God who blessed you, who gave you the grain or the grapes or the oil or the animals, the first fruits of the animals. So you'd have a certain percentage of the first yield, your product, your output that you would give to God. And so you go to the temple and you present it to the priest. And so it's telling you here in chapter 26 what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to say. So this is one piece of it, 26 verse 5, I said, yeah? So then you shall declare, talking to the man who brings the stuff, then you shall declare in the presence of the Lord your God this: my father was a refugee Aramean who went down to Egypt with a small household and lived there as a resident alien or foreigner. But there he became a nation great, strong, and numerous. When the Egyptians maltreated and oppressed us, imposing harsh servitude upon us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers. And the Lord heard our cry and saw our suffering, our work, and our oppression. Then the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and outstretched arm, with terrifying power, with signs and wonders, and brought us to this place, and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. It just means it has everything that we need. It's just a metaphor, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean literally that it's flowing with milk and honey. And now, therefore, I have brought the first fruits of the product of the soil, which you, Lord, have given to me. Okay? So that's an interesting statement for a couple of reasons. I mean, first, how is the person described, or the ancestors of the Jews? My father was it says here in my translation, a refugee Aramean, but really the word in Hebrew means a wanderer. Okay, so again, person wanders around, a nomad, all right? Drifter, as I said, okay? So that's a better translation than the translation I have here. And he's an Aramean, so he's from up here this way, which is modern-day Syria. This is called Aram. He's up north here somewhere, okay? Forget about this for the moment. And then somehow went down into Egypt, stayed there for a while, and then went back to the land of Canaan here. Didn't go back up to Aram where he's from. But so interesting. It's weird. It doesn't exactly, if you read the Bible history is pretty clear in the book of Genesis that you have Abram or Abraham, who is the forefather of the Jews, who is apparently living in southern Mesopotamia, who travels up north and then down into the land of Canaan, lives in Canaan for a while. Then his children or grandchildren, he's long dead, they decide to move down to Egypt, and then they later on move back into Canaan. So it's kind of a different thing that Deuteronomy, the different story that we find in Deuteronomy, okay? Which is interesting. It's a contradiction, what's going on here. Are they, it sounds like these are nomads who are moving around from one place to another and finally settle down. And that memory has been preserved in the oral tradition, which got written down eventually in this book called Deuteronomy. Anyways, but let's stick with the biblical story. A man living in southern Iraq, modern-day Iraq, okay, southern Mesopotamia, named Abraham or Abram. He's also called Abram. Same name. No difference. Is told according to the story, he's told by his God that he's worshiping
his God that he's worshiping, it doesn't mean he didn't believe in other gods, but his main God, he's told to leave. He feels compelled by his God to travel. He's told to go to a faraway place that he's never lived before, this place called Canaan, okay, on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. So he does. He follows the river up Haran and comes down south. When? Why don't you just go this way? Well, this is all desert, so want to avoid that. Stay along the river where there's water and towns and stuff like that, where you can bed for the night and find food. And this God that he worships promises Abram to be a special God of this man and his future family, because he doesn't have any children yet. He's married. He has a wife named Sarai, also known as Sarah. Again, same name. No difference, really. But they're both old and they have no children. Sarai is past the childbearing years, apparently. And yet this God is promising to Abram that, he will give him many children, even though Abram and his wife are too old. He will give them this land of Canaan. That's why he sent him there to live in Canaan. It will be his land, even though he is a foreigner. It's not where he's from. And that God is going to make his family so large that they will be a great nation. Even as I said, they don't have, even if they were going to have children, they had no children yet. So this God makes all these wacky promises in the book of Genesis to this guy. So he goes, he migrates. Okay? So that's Abram in a nutshell. He eventually does have a child. Actually, there's a couple of children. But he has a child. His first child is not this man Isaac from Sarai. He actually has another one before him called Ishmael. I'm going to mention him because he becomes important later on when we talk about Islam. Ms. Uttenreither, I lost you, eh? It's 1:45. You're right, Ms. Uttenreither. I'm wrong. I will see you on Thursday. God bless you all. I'm gotta find that. I'm wondering why. Alrighty. Have a good